So this video is for those of you that are new to poker and you've never played Texas Hold'em before. You don't know the rules, you don't know the basics of the game. So what I've done is I've added my very popular YouTube video, How to Play Texas Hold'em for Beginners, to this course. And you'll notice here on YouTube, it's the third most popular videos and I have just under 85,000 views. So if you're new to the game of poker and you don't know the basics of Texas Hold'em, start here. This is going to be your foundation and watch this video. Now, this is my YouTube video, so you're going to hear me reference to the course named Poker 101 and possibly other lectures in that Poker 101 course, but just ignore them. Understand that I pulled this video from my YouTube video. I did a little bit of editing, but I may talk about some of that stuff in here. So let's go ahead and let's jump into this video and understand it's quite lengthy. It's 31 minutes in length. So sit back, get ready, and I hope you enjoy this introduction to the game of Texas Hold'em for beginners. We're going to kick off our Poker 101 course talking about the rules of the game. So if you're new to Texas Hold'em and you don't know how to play the game, then you're going to want to stick around to learn how. So we're going to kick off our Poker 101 course talking about how to play the game of Texas Hold'em. So today's introductory lecture is geared towards complete beginners. If you don't know how to play the game, if you're interested in learning, then you're going to want to stick around. Now, for those of you that know how to play, just go ahead and skip over this lecture and jump to the next one. So what we're going to do is we're going to break this lecture up into multiple parts. We're going to talk about pre-flop play, we're going to talk about post-flop play, and then we're going to talk about hand rankings. What are the worst hands and what are the best hands in this game? And so what we're going to do is we're going to break it up and we're going to start off talking about pre-flop play. So let's go ahead and let's get into pre-flop play. Okay, so with pre-flop play, there's going to be people seated all around the table. So when you sit down at a poker table for the first time, you're going to notice that people are sitting all the way around the table. Now, for the sake of space for my camera, I went ahead and denoted that each person is just a chip of stack. So people aren't going to be this close to you. They're going to be spread out around the table. But in this example, we have 5 different people. And what you're going to notice is that there's going to be a dealer at the table. Now, in a home game, there's going to be typically a dealer button, and it's going to go ahead and slide clockwise every time there's a hand. So every time there's a new hand, the action slides clockwise and the dealer goes to the left. In a casino, the dealer is going to stay in the same spot, but they're going to have a dealer button and they're going to denote who the dealer is, who is acting as the dealer in each hand. So for example, I'm the dealer in this example, and the next hand, the player directly to my left will be the dealer, and the next hand after that, the person directly to the left will be the dealer, and so forth. Now, in addition to that, you're going to notice that there's going to be what's called a small blind or little blind and a big blind. And these are the 2 players directly to the left of the dealer in every hand. The small blind is the one directly to the left of the dealer. The big blind is a person 2 players over to the dealer. What they have to do in every single hand is that they have to put a force bet out. And so the small blind is typically going to be half of what the big blind is. In this example, we're going to assume we have $1 chips, and the small blind has to put $1 out, and the big blind has to put 2 chips, which is $2. So what will happen is that since I'm the dealer, the 2 players directly to my left have to be the small blind and the big blind, and they have to put the force bet out. Now, the whole reason for that is that it forces the action, because if there were never blinds, people would fold all their hands, and the only really reason they want to play is if they had premium holdings. This forces the action. It forces people to play. So as the dealer button moves, what will happen is that this will slide over. So for example, if this person now becomes the dealer next hand, little blind moves over here, big blind moves over here, and it just continues clockwise, and they have to put their force bets out, so forth. And that's how it works. So just keep an eye on out for that, and you'll have an idea. And whenever you sit down at a poker game, you'll know what the small blind and the big blind is. So for example, a 1-2 no limit game, the small blind is going to be $1 and the big blind is going to be $2. In a 1-3 no limit game, the small blind is going to be $1 and the big blind is going to be $3. In a limit game, limit games are a little different. So in a limit game, they'll denote them, for example, 2-4 limit or 3-6 limit. Those are the big bets and the small bets, and we're not going to go into all the details of how those work. But in a limit game, for example, 2-4, the big blind is the 2. And so the big blind would put 2 out, and the small blind would put 1 out. So that's how the blinds work. What'll happen is that the dealer will go ahead and shuffle up the deck. So I'm just going to shuffle one time, and they'll go ahead and they'll go clockwise, and they'll deal out each player 2 separate cards. These separate cards are your hold cards. So these are your cards that you play. So these 2 cards that I have right here are my cards that I get to play, and they will coordinate with the board texture, the flop, the turn, and the river. The boards that go out here that are community cards later in the post-flop rounds. So what happens is that with these 2 cards, there's anywhere from really bad cards to really good cards pre-flop. And the best cards are going to be pocket aces. The second best cards are going to be pocket kings. I'm not going to get into all the details of that. I'm going to talk about that stuff in my next course, Poker 201. But what will happen is that pre-flop, the action starts on, and let's go ahead and put the blinds out. The action will start on the person directly left to the big blind pre-flop, because they already have their bets out here. So the action starts here, and then it goes all the way around clockwise and finishes with the big blind. So this person will act first, and they have 3 different options. They can call the amount of the big blind, they can raise, or they can fold. And so let's just assume that this person wants to call. So they'll put the amount of the big blind out there, and I'll just go ahead and put their chips on their cards just so you can see them. This person can call, raise, or fold. And so let's just assume I'm looking at his card. This card's a crap. He'll throw them in the center. The dealer will take them and they'll put them in a muck pile. And then he'll be out of the hand. And let's say it's on me. I have a good hand I want to raise. Let's say that I raise it. I'll just raise it to 4 chips. Now this really isn't realistic unless we're playing limit. But I can raise it. And now they have to match my bet. So they can call, they can raise, or they can fold. So the minimum amount is 4 chips or $4. Let's assume that this person has a bad hand. They throw it away, and this now goes in the center. They don't get it back. And let's assume that this person decides to call and comes back around here, and this person decides to call as well. And so now what happens is that now we only have a total of 3 different players left in a hand. So once the action is done pre-flop, they'll go ahead and slide the money in, and that'll go into the pot. Now what happens with this is that there's different types of game. There is limit hold'em, there is pot limit, and there is no limit. Now pot limit you're typically not going to see. You're typically going to only see limit or no limit. But pot limit is a variant of poker. And the way that it works with limit, or we can call it fixed limit, is that there's fixed bets amounts that you can only bet in a certain amount on pre-flop, the flop, the turn, the river. And the dealer is going to tell you, if you know the structure of the game, you're going to know what it is. So you can only bet that amount, and you can't bet anything different. So you can bet that amount, and you can raise that amount, and that's it. In low limit, you can raise all in. So you can raise as much as you have left behind. And depending on the card room, there's going to be a minimum amount that you can raise. So the amount of raising and the amount of betting is really up to you. So the minimum bet is typically going to be the small blind or the big blind, depending upon the card room. And the maximum amount is how many chips you have left behind for no limit. And that's typically the game that a lot of people play today. And so that's the pre-flop portion. What's going to happen next is we'll go to post-flop, which encompasses the flop, the turn, and the river. And we're going to talk about the flop in the next video. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're now going to continue our discussion talking about post-flop play, and we're going to start by talking about the flop, which you'll notice right here. So the way post-flop works is that the dealer is going to deal 3 cards face up here, which is the flop, and then they'll do it again for the turn, and they'll do it again for the river, to the point where there's a total of 5 cards facing up. The whole goal is to make the best hand where you use a combination of any 5 cards, where it's these 5 cards plus your 2 hold cards. So your goal is to make the best hand possible with either 2 of your cards here, 1 of them, or none of them, to make a 5-card hand. Now, in terms of the best hand, we'll talk about what they are later on in this lecture, but I just want to walk through the dynamics of the betting rounds for the flop, the turn, and the river. So with the flop, what will happen is that we have our betting round in place. The pre-flop betting round already occurred, and we're ready to start with the flop. I went ahead and added on some more chips for our players, just to give them a little more because we were running short with the pre-flop stuff. So what will happen for the flop is that the dealer is going to burn 1 card here on the top. They'll put that in the muck, and then they'll go deal 3 different cards face up. And these 3 cards are what we consider the flop. So what happens now, since I'm the dealer, betting rounds are going to start here, and we're going to go clockwise. So now since there's only 3 players left in the hand, it's going to start with this opponent here. And I'm going to go ahead and put their hands face up so you can see them. Realistically, you're not going to see them, but I think it's important to give you an idea of what the hands are, and we'll talk about what makes the best hand. So if we look at the flop, this player's first act, they look down, they have 7-9 offsuit, and they flopped middle pair. It's not the best hand, it's not the worst hand, it's on them. Let's say, and let's move this player's chips out of the way, let's say they decide to check because their first act. They can either check, they can open fold, or they can bet. And because we're playing no limit here, they can bet as many of chips as they have. And the minimum bet, let's say, is a big blind. So the minimum bet is $2. Now, I did talk about a variant called pot limit. Pot limit is where you can bet up to the size of the pot, but you typically are not going to see that with Texas Hold'em. You're typically going to see it with a variant called pot limit Omaha, and we're not going to be playing pot limit Omaha where you get 4 cards. That's a different game, and we're focusing instead just on Texas Hold'em when we get 2 cards. So let's say he decides to check because he doesn't have that great of a hand. It heads over to this player. He knows that he ends up flopping top pair, 1 pair of jacks. So let's say he decides to bet and he wants to bet $4. So he bets $4. I look down, I flop 3 of a kind with a pair of 5s here, and what this is we call this flopping a set when we flop 3 of a kind. Now, I like the board texture. There are some draws, there's not that many. I decide just to call, so I call. Comes back to this opponent, he says, well, I have a pair of 9s. 2 people are, 1 guy bets, 1 guy calls. I'm gonna call 1 time, and so he decides to call. So there's no raises, he could raise, he could fold. I could have raised as well here with my trip 5s, my set of 5s, but I decided to call just instead. So I call, he calls, and the money goes into the middle, and now we go to the turn. So let's take a look at the turn in the river in the next portion of this lecture. All right, so now we're on the turn. So the dealer's gonna do what the dealer did on the flop. They're gonna burn a card and turn a face card up on the turn. And I just wanna make sure I mention this now, is that we're playing no limit Texas Hold'em. So I did say that there was pot limit and there was fixed limit, or just you can call it limit. We're not playing limit Hold'em, we're not playing pot limit, because pot limit is typically gonna be a different game called pot limit Omaha, which is entirely different than Texas Hold'em. We are playing no limit Texas Hold'em. I just want to make sure I cover that now. So this player with middle pair, they don't improve on the turn, they decide to check. This player again has top pair, decides to bet. Let's say that these chips are worth $5, and so you'll notice that I did add on some additional chips to make sure that we had enough for these betting rounds, because pre-flop there really wasn't enough. So this player bets. They decide to bet $12. I look down, I still have the best hand. He's not afraid of betting. I'm just gonna go all in for the rest of my chips, which would be his $12 plus, if I looked at it correctly, another $45 on top of that. So I call and I raise $45 all in. This guy looks over, he only has middle pair. He decides to fold, he's out of the hand. And it's back to this player. This player decides, well, you know what, I have top pair, I'm gonna call. So he calls, and we look at what he has. Again, he also has a little less. So he only has $35, he doesn't have $45. So the amount that goes in is actually gonna be another $35. So I can take my extra $10 back. And if we take a look at this, here's the $35. This will all now go into the pot. And let's go ahead and slide these out of the way. And in these all-in situations, now we're gonna go to the river. Since we're both all in, there's no money left behind between the both of us, because he only has the amount of chips that are in the pot already. There's no more betting on the river. Now, if we both had chips behind, we would again have another betting round on the river, but because there are no more chips behind, there's no more betting round. So again, the dealer's gonna burn a card and they're gonna turn one up, and we're gonna look and see who has the best hand. He has a pair of jacks with a 10, 9, 7 kicker. And so what the dealer is typically going to do is show the different hands. So here's this is not the winning hand. The winning hand is actually going to be my hand, which is going to be trip 5s, or we can call them a set of 5s with a jack 9 kicker. So this is going to be the best hand. They'll turn that up like that and say there's the best hand with these. And we win all these chips, and this hand is over. So that's the whole process of going from pre-flop to the flop in the turn in the river for Texas Hold'em, specifically No Limit Texas Hold'em. If you're playing limit, it's going to be similar. It's just that it's fixed bets amounts, and you're going to know what they are when you're at the table. And if you mess up, the dealer's going to let you know, and they'll correct you, which is not really that big of a thing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the different hand rankings. So I want to show you guys the different hand rankings and what makes the worst hand all the way to the best hand. So I'll go ahead and put some on the board and we'll talk about them. So I'll be back in 1 second with that. So for this portion of this lecture, we're now going to talk about hand rankings, what makes the best hand and what makes the worst hand. And we're also going to do some live play demonstration. And what I want to do is I want to jump onto my computer to show you the hand rankings because it's going to be easier than showing it this way. I just want to show you on my computer screen what's the best hands down to the worst hands. And then we're going to jump into some live play. So I'm going to demonstrate playing and talk about the dynamics of the game and just to make sure you understand how everything works from pre-flop all the way down to the river. So let's go ahead and let's get into that. Now we're going to take a look at poker hand rankings from the very best hands you can make in Texas Hold'em to the very worst hands you can make. So first off, before we get started, if you're watching this on YouTube or if you're watching this on Micro Grinder Poker School, go ahead and make this full screen because it's going to look too small if you're not watching it in full screen. And I did this on purpose. I wanted to make sure you saw all the hand rankings on the very same page without having to scroll back and forth or up and down. So go ahead and make it full screen and pause the video and then head on back to this. Okay, so I'm assuming that you now made this full screen. Let's go ahead and get started. The very best hand that you can make in Texas Hold'em is a royal flush. And if you make one of these, if you ever make one of these, then you want to be proud of yourself. Maybe take a picture because this rarely happens. Same thing for a straight flush. So a royal flush is an ace, king, queen, jack, and 10, all of the same suit. So it has to either be of diamonds, hearts, clubs, or spades. That's the royal flush. That's the very best hand, and it's rarely ever made in Texas Hold'em. The second best hand you can make is a straight flush. Again, this is rarely ever made in Texas Hold'em as well. This is 5 cards in sequence, all the same suit. So they just have to be in sequence. So for example, you see on the screen, it's 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. They're all the same suit. That would be a straight flush. Another one would be ace, 2, 3, 4, 5. We call that the wheel straight. But if it's all of the same suit, that is straight flush. So anything that is 5 cards in sequence, but it's not ace through 10, and then that's a straight flush. The third best hand you can make is 4 of a kind. So very simple. This example is 4 jacks. So if you had 4 aces, 4 kings, 4 queens, that would be 4 of a kind. That's the third best hand. The fourth best hand is a full house, and that is 3 of a kind plus a pair. So this example is 3 tens plus a pair of nines. The fifth best hand you can make is a flush. So that's any 5 cards of the same suit. They don't have to be in sequence. They just need to be all 5 of the same suit. So they need to be spades, clubs, diamonds, or hearts. The sixth best hand that you can make is a straight. And that's 5 cards in the same sequence, but not the same suit. So in this example, you notice that we have the 9 of clubs, the 8 of diamonds, 7 of spades, 6 of diamonds, and 5 of hearts. That would be a straight. They just have to be in sequence. They don't need to be the same suit. The seventh best hand is 3 of a kind. So for example, this is what I had earlier in this lecture. In our example, I had 3 5s. In this one, we have 3 7s with a king and a 3 kicker. The eighth best hand is 2 pairs. So in this example, this person has a pair of 4s, a pair of 3s with a queen kicker. The ninth best hand would be 1 pair, and that's simply 2 cards of the same rank. So for example, this opponent has, or this person has, a pair of aces with an 8, 4, and a 7 kicker. And then if you don't have any of those, if you don't have a pair, if you don't have 3 of a kind, a straight, a flush, a full house, or better, then you simply just have a high card. And in this example, this opponent just has a jack high with an 8, 4, 3 deuce kicker. So those are the hand rankings. Now the way that it works is that, let's say one person has 1 pair, another person has 2 pair, the person with 2 pair wins. If another person has 3 of a kind and another person has straight, the person that has a straight wins. So it's always the person in the hand that has the very best hand. Now let's say that somebody has a full house and another person has a full house. Well, it's the person that has the bigger full house is going to win. So you can have smaller full houses, you can have bigger full house. A good example would be, let's take this board. Let's say that somebody has 3 10s and 2 8s, another person has 3 10s and 2 9s. Well, the 10s full of 9s beats the 10s full of 8s. So the person that has the 10s full of 9s is going to win in that situation. Same thing for a flush. Let's say that one person has an ace high flush, another person has a jack high flush. The ace high flush is going to win because it has a higher card. Same thing for a straight. Let's say that somebody has this straight with 9 high, another person has a 10 high. The person with the 10 high straight is going to win. So in a nutshell, that is poker hand rankings from the best hands down to the worst hands. If you don't really fully understand this, just simply Google poker hand rankings for Texas Hold'em, and there's going to be a lot of resources. And it's just really a basic thing that you'll learn to master fairly quickly. So now what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to some live play, and I'm going to demonstrate some Texas Hold'em in action so you guys can actually see everything I've been talking about in action. And we'll go ahead and play maybe 5 or 6 hands just to make sure you guys understand the pre-flop play, the post-flop play, how the dealer button works, how it moves clockwise, and how the blinds work as well. So let's go ahead and let's jump over to that. Alright, so I went ahead and loaded up one table of what we call 5NL. This is a maximum of a $5 buying game online on Ignition Casino. The small blind is 2 cents and the big blind is 5 cents. I am in the big blind starting out, and so I have to post my big blind. So pre-flop, you'll notice that the action starts with the person directly to the left of me. So on the big blind, player number 4 is a small blind, player number 3 is what we call on the dealer button. And so pre-flop action is going to start here, go all the way around, and then finish with me. So player number 2 decides to raise. So when it's actions on him, he can call the 5 cents, he can raise, or he can fold. Actions on me, I can fold, I can call, or I can raise because there's no limit. So I'm going to go ahead and call with my 3s. And now I'm first to act post-flop. So post-flop, the action starts with the blinds, whoever's left in the hand. I have 4th best pair, so I decide to check. I can check or bet. And because there's no limit, I can bet up to how much money I have behind in my stack. So I check. He's taking a little bit of time. He decides to bet. He bets, and so action is now back on me. If I want to see the turn, I can either call his 16 cents. If I feel like my hand is good enough to raise, I could raise, or if I wanted to bluff, I could raise, bluff as well. And I can raise as much as how much money I have behind. Since my hand isn't that good, I just go ahead and fold. And he takes it down. So you'll notice now that the dealer button goes clockwise every single hand. So when that hand ends, it moved over here. He's now on the button. I'm in the small blind. Next hand, I will be on the button. He'll be in the small blind, and he will be in the big blind. So we have a pair of jacks. We call these pocket jacks. Action is on me. Well, action's not on me yet. Now action is on me. So I'd elect to raise. I raise to 15 cents, and he folds, and we take it down. Now again, dealer button goes clockwise, and really that's what I really want you to get out of this, is that the dealer button is always going to go clockwise. The action's always going to go clockwise. And so this is how we get the forced bets, and how everybody has to take their turn putting in these forced bets, these blind bets, meaning the small blind and the big blind. So this player decides to open raise pre-flop. The action's on me. I can either fold, call his raise, or I could re-raise. Again, my hand isn't that good, so I'm just going to fold. So now the action is on the small blind, and he elects to raise. He makes it 50 cents, and now it's back on him. He can either call the amount left to call to match the 50 cents, or he can re-raise, or he can fold, which he elected to do. He elected to fold. So he again raises. This player decides to call, and I don't have that very good of a hand, so I elect to fold. Flop is a jack 10-5. We call this a rainbow flop because it's 3 different suits. We have a heart, a spade, and a diamond. So whenever there's 3 different suits, we simply call it rainbow. So he bets 42 cents into the pot of 48 cents. He bets a pretty big size, and he takes it down. Again, I have pocket jacks. So it's on me. We elect to open raise. Now again, it's going to go clockwise. And we just wait for everybody else to determine what they want to do, if they want to call, if they want to raise, or if they want to fold. Now, I'm not going to be talking about all sorts of different strategies and how you should play pre-flop and post-flop in this lecture. In this lecture, the whole purpose is just to show you how the game works, to give you an idea of how to play this game, how to play what we call no limit Texas Hold'em, or just Texas Hold'em in general. So now it's back on me. He raises, and I have a decision to make. I can either fold, I can call, or I can raise. I'm not going to talk about the strategy. I'm just going to call in this situation. And now, because he is in position to me, he's on the button, and I am first to act because I am close to the button. Everybody else folded, so now it goes clockwise. I'm first to act. I like to check because I don't have that strong of a hand. I have a pair of jacks. He checks back. Again, on the turn, the action is on me. I'm going to check back as well. He bets. We're going to call once, and then we're going to check back again. Our hand isn't that great, but we do have second pair. And the action is on him again. He bets again. He bets really big. We don't have a pair of aces. We can't beat a pair of aces, and this is what we call a 3-bet pot when he re-raises pre-flop. So we just simply fold our pair of jacks here. So anyways, that's going to go ahead and conclude this portion of this lecture. I'm going to go ahead and sit out. What I wanted to get out of this, what I really wanted to show you with this portion is just how the game works. So if you're new to the game of Texas Hold'em, you can simply go online, you can play these $5 games, you can play $2 games, and get an idea of how the game works before you go and play higher stakes games, especially if you want to play live. You can also play what we call free games online. So there's a lot of play money games. You can play those as well. So all that stuff is going to be good just to give you, a bit of an introduction to the game, or even a home game. You can play a home game with your fams and family. All that's really going to help you out. It's going to help you improve your game. So that's going to conclude this portion of the lecture. If you guys have any questions, definitely let me know. If not, thanks for watching, and we'll go ahead and conclude this lecture in just one sec. Well, that's going to conclude our introductory lecture on Texas Hold'em. So we talked about a lot of different things today. We talked about pre-flop play. We talked about our blinds, right? Our big blind, our small blind, and our dealer button, and the importance of understanding how they rotate clockwise as we play from one hand to the next. We talked about the betting structures for limit and specifically no limit, because really, let's face it, that is the most popular game today. And then we also talked about how the game works. We talked about how we each get our 2 hole cards, and then there's the community cards out on the board, right? There's the flop, the turn, and the river, and how we need to take those 5 cards that are the community cards and our 2 cards ourselves to make the best 5-card hand. We then talked about the hand rankings, so I quickly introduced you to what are the best hands and the worst hands you can make in this game, and then I did a short demonstration of doing some live play on Ignition Casino. Now, if you still want to get some more practice in, my recommendation is to start off with playing with play money games. There's a lot of them online. A lot of the online casinos allow you to download their clients and play free money games, so play money games, or you can go to Facebook and there's Zynga Poker. You can play that and it's free money. So my recommendation is always start off at the free games. If you're just trying to learn the game, then once you have the basics down, jump to some micro stakes games or play a home game with some friends and family, and then jump into the deeper waters where you're playing for higher stakes once you have a better idea of what you're doing. So that's going to conclude this portion of the course in this lecture.